I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10. Nothing like stepping out of the factory to do a little bit of fishing, because today I need to process oil by the end of the episode. That means we're going to need to focus on getting a distillery up and running, but believe me, there's a lot of moving parts that we're going to need beforehand. But I might as well get myself an oily bee right from the start. Look at that. We got one literally as I hit the record button. You can't make these things up. Now, I am going to try my best to fish up a couple of these because this is going to just produce a bunch of oil for us, and we can go ahead and have that running while we start working on all the other machines, because we're going to need this oil when we set up the distillation towers. Now, for these bees to work, they are going to need some crude oil, and thankfully the crude oil from Pneumaticraft, believe it or not, will actually work. So now with a little bit of oil right in front of the hive, this should start producing some of those combs. Just to make sure, let's go ahead and try this out. And there we go. So now we have some of those. That should be getting sent into this if I configured this whole side right, because I started using the other side now. At this point, you may be wondering, Chosen, why do we need a distillery? What is a distillery? And honestly, that's a good question, and I'm going to figure that out hopefully today. But looking through recipes, you can see a huge string of recipes here. I've essentially gotten the Kanthal production started. So that was basically the repeat of our other setup. And over here, I have started accelerating these. So I'm now using souls to speed up the process of producing Kanthal and also producing steel. You can see over here, we are starting to build up steel, which is very, very nice. And I have tons of it being produced over there. This I went ahead and ramped up, which does seem like it is too much, I think, now, because this is backed up inside of our vacuum freezer. But being able to accelerate these blocks is kind of nice, allowing us to kind of progress even faster. So just a tip, if you haven't set up the industrial foregoing souls, definitely do that. But anyways, to get back on topic of the distillery, there's a lot of complex parts here, and breaking it down just using JEI is really, really rough for me. But I am trying my best. So according to the kind of progression that I've looked at, to be able to get to the distillation tower, which is ultimately, by the way, in case you were wondering what we're working towards, going to be needed to make the large advanced motor. The reason we need a distillation tower is going to be mainly for our RAM and the processing unit board. So the RAM itself requires the styrene-butadiene rubber. This is stuff that we're going to have to work towards, and we're also going to need a few other things like argon and things like that. The digital circuit itself also needs the circuit board. Now, to be able to make this circuit board, well, this requires the polyethylene, and polyethylene looks like it's going to be pretty important for making all of our future components for this digital circuit board, right? This is just one of the things that we actually need here. So how do we get polyethylene? There's actually a ton of different ways, and you may notice chromium, which we do have produced, is going to be one of the ways that we get it, but we're also going to need ethylene, and there's a couple of different ways we can get ethylene. It looks like ethylene can be produced from a distillation tower, but before we can do that, we have to use a chemical reactor with sulfur to produce ethylene, this method. And to make ethanol, well, we have to use a regular distillery using sugar solution to make ethanol. Takes a little bit of time, a little bit of EU, and this takes sugar, tons of sugar, to make the sugar solution. So the sugar solution, by the way, it uses a full bucket of it to produce 10 millibuckets, and we're back into the good old mechanism style fluid factoring. Yes, so getting all of this set up, we can accelerate things, which is going to make it a little bit nicer using the souls. That is something to keep a note of, and that's going to help us in the future. So let's go ahead and get started, and we need to start by producing ethanol to work our way towards getting that polyethylene. Now, the assembly line for this production looks a little bit like this. We have sugar and water that are just essentially making that sugar solution going into a barrel. Then we pump out the sugar solution into the distillery. Very, very slow process. And not only on top of it being very slow, we have some other problems, right? Because it only makes 10 millibuckets per bucket of this solution here. So we are going to want to speed this up. And then that, of course, makes ethanol, which then gets sent into this machine with some sulfur. And this ultimately is going to produce ethylene and also sulfuric acid. So the sulfuric acid gets used in other things. So having it linked into our drawer system kind of works in that regard. And having double fluid drawers is so nice for these processes. But yes, I need to take that ethylene and send it into this machine. And now that it's locked up, I can go ahead and do that to be able to make the polyethylene mixed with chromium dust. So I believe, yeah, this is the regular ethylene. That's going to get placed into here, and this is going to jumpstart. So I need to accelerate this. So to do that, we can go ahead and use our soul surges, and that just makes it so nice, right? I can just run a cable along the back, placing my soul surges on the back of these machines. I don't think like these are really going to need soul surges, but just in case, I'm going to go ahead and connect them up just like this, running along the back side of our cables here. So this is going to at least make these run a bit faster. Like especially this, I can already see this is going significantly faster than it was. And we're going to need that. I may even need to add more soul surges onto this one particular machine just to make it keep up with everything for right now. As you can see right there, I'll now have a bit more on this. Yeah, and that is now pumping along quite well. And perfect, we are now producing polyethylene. Now, it's not the fastest production in the world, but this is how we have to kind of get started with this. So we'll automatically output that out, and I'll go ahead and be locking this and collecting it just like so. So now we get to dive into an assembler, and this is going to be my first one I have placed thus far. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an assembler assigned per item that I want to have crafted. So for this, I'm going to use a functional storage drawer, and this is kind of a tip that I'll recommend for things like this. I don't want a ton of them, but I would like to have a stack of them. And if you didn't know, there is actually a downgrade that you can use. This is an iron downgrade, and this is going to limit this barrel right here to only being able to hold 64 items, which is kind of important for something like this, allowing us to essentially limit the amount of items this assembler will craft, because by default, this barrel holds like 2,048 items, which is way more than I actually want this thing processing. So what is the first item that we're going to have processing in here? Well, now that we have ourselves some polyethylene, I can go ahead and I should be able to assign this the actual craft, right? And so we're making the large motor, we go down into this, and we notice the digital circuit board is the thing that I need to craft, and I can click to move the items into here, and this should lock this recipe for us automatically. So good that we can do this. Notice it locks the fluids and everything else. Now we just have to have an exporter kind of do some of these crafts. Like for example, request craft the electronic circuit, which is nothing for our assembler system, the aluminum, and just have that automatically send our stainless steel plates into here, and it will also send that polyethylene. So if I really wanted to, I'll just go ahead and hit the A button over here to assign this. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to transfer this over. And let's see, I do have stainless plates apparently somewhere. So yeah, I just want to make sure to have all of this assigned, and including the polyethylene, which I can go ahead and assign here as well. So now that I have all of them assigned over here, it's going to make it a lot easier to set up my exporter. Before I even plug it in, I can go ahead and place a crafting request card, and then make sure it's set to scheduling to go ahead and sort all of that out. Put our aluminum, our silicon battery, our electronic circuit board, and our stainless in here. And yes, of course, also polyethylene. And now that that's in here, it should send all of those items in, and this will constantly keep crafting those items so long as we have those parts available. And this will help me keep a few of these items in stock. Like, it's definitely going to be necessary and is going to speed up our crafting. I would not want to have this constantly like request crafting, because it does take quite a bit of time between crafts in order to make our first parts. But like, you'll see that this is going to fill up, and thankfully with it being locked, it's going to have nowhere else to put or buffer the items. So yeah, I think after we get this all powered on, this is going to look really, really good. Get that powered up. It's going to receive the polyethylene right here that we're producing, and we have digital circuit boards now automated. And something else to note, if you want this to only keep like one of these items in stock, you can limit the capacity on these all the way down to like 1, and you can set like each one, right, all the way down to like 6 for this one, and so on and so forth. So that way the capacity on here can only hold the amount that's currently inside. Now I decided, since I was going ahead and setting up the assemblers, might as well also set up an assembler that is producing these basic upgrades. And I've got 16 of them in this machine over here, converting the sugar solution into ethanol. And my goodness, this is now producing a bit faster, allowing things to work even better than before. But this is definitely not the best way to do this. This is just the getting started method. So fantastic. Now that we can craft ourselves a digital circuit, now we need to start focusing on the turbo machine hulls. And to be able to do this, which is what's going to be needed for that distillation tower, we're going to need sodium batteries. This requires sodium, and this is something that is quite easy for us to actually gain. We just need to send lapis dust into our machine with a little bit of silicon dust, which we are producing already, and aluminum dust, and voila, we now have sodium. This process right here, straightforward. We're going to be crushing lapis down into lapis dust. That is then going to get funneled into our electrolyzer automatically by getting it sent here, and that should be split into a bunch of different things. Now, we're also going to receive, I believe, oxygen as a byproduct to this. So yes, we could also use salt, and that would give us chlorine. I don't know which one is actually better at this point. We have a ton of salt, and we're already producing oxygen, but I'm not producing chlorine, I don't think. What exactly would chlorine be used for? Oh, it's used for the you know what? It might be a better idea for us to use this because we can use this to make potassium chloride down the road. So I'm thinking for this, we can have the side auto output the fluid. So we can have the fluid ejected over here. And on this side, we'll have the items. So yes, I think I'll do this. I think the fluid should auto eject into this, considering this is like the one place it can go. If not, I can use a fluid pipe to definitely pull the fluids out. And then the items we want auto ejecting, and I'll just simply send salt to this container. Now, if you're wondering how I'm automating salt, this setup right here is how I'm automating salt. And I do have quite a bit of it, and I'm pretty sure this is the salt we need, the salt dust. I think this is what will convert. Yeah, salt dust is exactly what we need. So just give this some power, and we should be up and running. It's also going to go a bit faster as well. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure how I can define a fluid side as an output for auto outputting without it going both for both items and fluids all in one. So for right now, yeah, I'm just going to use a pipe to send it over just like so. Now, another sneaky component that we're going to need in this process as well is a magnetic stainless steel rod. Now, to be able to get the magnetic stainless steel rod, we need the polarizer, but we're also going to need neodymium dust. And this is where things start to get a little bit more hectic. But honestly, it's kind of similar to everything else we've been doing. We just need to send the monzonite dust into a centrifuge, and that's going to produce helium for us as well. And we're going to start getting some other stuff, including cadmium dust, neodymium dust, and the yttrium? I hope I said that right. Yttrium? It may not even have the Y, may be silent. I have no idea. But if we follow the same rules that I've been using for all other machines, yes, we should be able to fit all of those items inside of one of the drawers. Man, I think we are getting there. It is a slow process here, but stainless and the neodymium, that should both go into these slots, just like so. And I have them both set to round robin on the schedule mode, and everything should work just fine. It's going to pull from our current available over here. And yeah, this will kind of split them up technically. And I just need to have this export into the drawer and send it over. I think that's going to be it. A little bit of power and we're good to go. So perfect. Now we meet our next boss, and that is going to be needing another EBF. But this time we're actually going to be upgrading our EBF because this is currently producing Kanthal. And I have the process happening over here where we're producing all of the Kanthal products, and they're automatically being processed over here, right? We have 6,000 Kanthal wire stored up and ready to go. So now what I need to do is use that Kanthal to start producing a new alloy. I guess you can call it an alloy, a new hot ingot, and that is going to be annealed copper hot ingot. And this is one of the other components that's required in our advanced pump. I think for the most part, I have just about everything else from what I've gone through, but we do need to start producing annealed copper wire to make the advanced motor. Now, I think when setting up the Kanthal version, the only major change I do believe is the NV input hatch, because this is going to take it up to another tier of energy. So I can use the MV version now that we have that available to us, and still the input hatch will go here, and then I'll have an output hatch right here. I'm also going to need a vacuum freezer just like this one, and it's going to be built the same way as all of our other vacuum freezers. But the big change on this setup, right, is that we are going to need that new Kanthal coil. And I love how once I made this electric better furnace, nice, all these little subtle jabs, I gotta enjoy that. Now once you get all the components in, you do have to change a setting in here. So select multi-block shape, switch it from the cupro nickel to the Kanthal, and once that's done, the whole multi-block will then finish. And perfect, we are now at a valid shape and an active status on a new Kanthal EBF. Now this EBF is also going to need a fluid input hatch because we need to send oxygen into this setup. And over here, we just need to simply send copper. And I'm going to have the copper go into a macerator that's going to crush that into dust. And then we need to send that automatically into the hatch. And to do this, there's a couple of ways we can do this without accessing the back of the machine. We can just simply hold shift and right click on the little corner piece, and that will actually set the output to the back. And whenever I turn the auto on, notice that is going to go inside, and I believe this is going to start running. Yeah, it's going to start processing and using that oxygen to produce all of that stuff. And voila, after this is all ran through, we should have ourselves a beautiful annealed copper ingot. And now I've got to process this down into some other components. Now, just simply looking back at all of the stuff that we have behind us, oh, this is amazing. But we are now at the part where we can make distillation towers already. This right here is what is required in the distillation tower. And to be able to craft this thing, oh boy, yeah, this is a lot, right? So just pulling up one craft uses 11,000 bytes of information here. So many individual items required in order to do these crafts. It's going to take just alone 119 analog circuits. Thankfully, we have those passively crafted. Most of our stuff is all passively crafted, so it's going to be really nice. So you just need 3 digital circuits here. I think the big thing is, remember, we only have like circuit boards being crafted on demand, like up to 64. So we can't like pull a craft that requires more than 64 of those circuits all in one. But just looking at this list here, I mean, I think we're ready to start this. I just got to replan a few things. It happens whenever you do multiple crafts that might be using those items. You have to replan for that item. That's why that's doing that. But yeah, I mean, there it goes. Look at that quantum crafter really going to work here. I mean, it's just insanely fast. I mean, it's basically an instant for most of those things. And that's how fast it is to craft a distillation tower. That's ridiculous. So if I literally wasn't proving how powerful the quantum crafter is in this series, man, I don't know what else could, because this is where it is primarily being used the most, and also that matrix to be able to store all of these patterns, because we have really started to fill our crafting patterns. I have done all of these that you see here. There is so many patterns that I have made throughout this series. It's kind of absurd. The list just keeps going on and on. Yeah, it just keeps going. Oh boy. Now, technically, I am going to need 2 distillation towers, so I might as well go ahead and get the next one started, because we are going to be converting crude oil from our B, which our oily B is producing right here. And that crude oil is going to go into the distillation tower and is going to be broken down into 3 separate components. Now, from my research and talking with you guys on the Discord, I love you guys' help. It's been absolutely amazing. The distillation tower has different heights that we can go, and eventually we are going to need one that can do this, which I think is the base size, being able to do the 3 different fluids. But we will need to go up to, I think, one that's like 10 tall. And if we look at the multi-block materials needed here, I believe this is the base size, or actually we might need to do the one that has 3 of these pipe machine casings, right? And then the ultimate one is going to be 3. So it's like 1, 2, 3. I'm assuming this is how it is. And you can see by right here, actually, I don't know, we may be able to get away with the first one. I'm gonna have to figure that out. But the bottom here is ultimately what we're wanting to produce. And this is gonna be the steamed craft naphtha. And all of these individual components here, we're gonna want to make sure they're all in separate drawers. But not to confuse you, essentially, we are going to get steamed cracked naphtha through taking a little bit of our other product that we get from the original oil, and we're going to have to send that through a couple of chemical reactors. You can see we have another chemical reactor here with hydrogen, and everything essentially, though, starts at that crude oil, and it's going to be the sulfuric naphtha that we're really going to need from this process as of right now. Okay, and just to make it clear, like, why are we going after this in the first place? It's all based on this large motor and making the processing unit. To be able to make this processing unit, almost all of this stuff we have access to. We've made our digital circuit, making the memory management unit's not too hard, and also this component right here, the algorithmic logic unit, is also not that difficult. But the RAM does require this styrene-butadiene rubber, and is going to be some of the harder things that we have to make, and that's where it requires, like I had said before, it's going to require that distillation tower process. Now, I'm going to go in with the assumption that the more of these stainless steel pipe casings that show up in the multi-block, the more fluids we get out. So I'm going to need at least 3 on this. And of course, putting the wrench in your offhand allows me, once placed, to see the size of the distillation tower. So I know that this right here is probably not correct, but it gives you the first initial size. And I think I'm going to need a energy hatch, which is going to go in the back. Okay, so here we go. That seems correct. And I'm also assuming that we'll have the maximum, which is 6 hatches on the side that are all going to be fluid outputs. Okay, so maybe I have too many casings, but we'll go ahead and start lining these like so. I will have to exchange those with hatches down the road, but I think this is it, right? This will be 1, 2, 3 tall, and this is going to be the max size. We'll have to see whenever I open up the interface. I don't know if that just gets left, or do we have to cap it off at the top? I don't know. It says status active, and then we do a height of 3. So notice it says a height of 3 is the most. So yes, I think my assumption was correct. Very, very nice. Okay, so with this, we can now put in our inputs and outputs, right? We should have 1 input, and we're going to need 3 outputs. And this is where we can set all of these to just auto output directly into fluid containers. Now, interesting on the fluid output, these are going to actually go up just like this along the side for the output hatches. Very, very interesting. And I'm assuming they're all going to line up with what we're actually going to be producing here. But just to make sure everything works, let's take our wrench, make sure we shift right click to make sure these are all facing the correct direction, and make sure the output is set to automatic. Then we can just simply tack on our fluid drawers just like this. And once we do our first operation, this right here is going to get locked, and then we can set the fluid amount and void, just in case we don't want to generate certain ones. So I guess moment of truth here, we just need to export our oil, right? Crude oil. So grab some crude oil from Modern Industrialization, slap it on there, get ourselves a cable. I think I'm just going to use regular colored cables. And I've already ran a wireless connector over here. So we'll just connect it in just like that. And then we'll grab a gate and give this some power on the back. If all is well, this should hopefully start as soon as I have that export crude oil. Maybe crude oil is in there. It's filling up. Aha. And it has started. So yes, we are actively producing resources. Okay, and so right here we have sulfuric light fuel, heavy fuel, and naphtha, all of which is being produced. Time to lock these drawers and get them upgraded. So now for the processing of all 3 of the types of fluids that I want out of here. And actually, if we set up 3 distillers down here, they're all going to kind of loop into each other, and we'll be able to get the most out of this setup. So to make this really simple, all I'm going to need is a reactor duo for each, like for each, double split drawers for each of the fluid types. And so we have a light, a heavy, and a naphtha. And so all of these are kind of handled the exact same way. They just require hydrogen. So inside of here, we just want to make sure we take our initial fuel like so, and then we drag hydrogen in with it and make sure they are kind of split here. We'll come back to this in a second, and we just got to do this to this one. Make sure that's split. Hydrogen going in just like so, and so on and so forth. Now on here, we probably want to make sure that we lock our recipe just in case like we run out of hydrogen or something, because I would almost guarantee that that will cause a problem down the road. So making sure we lock it by just simply adding our recipe in is going to help us as well in the future. And then for the next setup here, we're going to be dragging in the light fuel that this produces. and then steam. So these are just going to be infused with steam essentially, and that will give us the cracked version. And for steam, if you remember from the initial setup, we basically have that going into an entangle porter, and I have that entangle porter just essentially piping out all of our excess steam, and I have this pipe set to a -1 on the priority, which is pretty cool that it has a priority system built into it. So the way everything else that needs steam gets it first, and then the remainder simply goes into this drawer, which is now set up into our AE system, which makes it super easy to simply turn all of these machines on by just hooking in our cable. And the cool part is when we set up our distillation, every single part of our distillation now for all 3 of these components are going to essentially run into one another. Because it looks like, for example, if I do the processing of heavy fuel, and we take a look at the cracked version, when it goes through the distillation tower, it's going to produce light fuel. And we already have a setup for light fuel that's going to automatically get sent back through this system. So we're just going to make sure we're maintaining enough to keep these constantly running and producing. And yet again, I can't vouch for this drawer system enough, because this is what's making all of this possible right here. So all of these are getting added in. I now have this locked. Actually, these need to be unlocked temporarily and also removed. I kind of almost made a whoopsie. This has to be removed here. And I also need these unlocked. So I can't add them until after the fluids go in and I have them locked. But yeah, this is now going to start running because I added the other ones. So the steamed light fuel right here is hopefully going to drop down. Oh wait, I have to do this, right? There we go. Now I can lock it. This one is now steamed cracked heavy fuel. Lock that bad boy, and also the naphtha. Perfect. All of them are ready to go. And these 3 different fuels are actually going to get added to 3 more distillation towers I have to create. So now I think we're about to be cooking with all of these distillation towers. I've got to get all of the fluids placed on the sides, then that one's finished. It's funny because going in this order from the light to heavy and then to naphtha, we essentially go 5 hatches, then we're going to go 4 hatches on this one. And then this one goes all the way up to 8 hatches. So yeah, you can see the size of these multi-blocks slowly but surely increasing. But now that I have it done, all of these should be valid shapes, and I just need to send the appropriate fluids into them. So with all of this coming in from our oil, it's time to just simply attach our AE cables. I have all of these filtered. This is going to be the cracked fuel. Once it does receive enough of this, you can see it's slowly building up. It will jumpstart. Same on this side, which is going to be the steamed cracked heavy fuel. And then over here, the one that we really want and is going to be boosted by all of the others, this right here is the steamed cracked naphtha. So perfect. If all is correct, everything should lead into this one, which will ultimately produce a ton of different materials. And I do have all of these set to auto eject, which is something I did have to do. There we go. We can see this is now filled up. And once I link this in, that's when things are really going to start to take place. Oh, it's so cool seeing everything already starting to fill up. Now it's just time to start locking all of these drawers. So now that this is processing, we can see things like this heavy fuel that's filling up here that is also being produced down here actually getting consumed. So now that we have our distillation towers, we are very, very close and really starting to close in on like our final product that is going to be needed. The things that we're actually working towards, right? Like the large advanced motor and also being able to get into the uranium fuel rods. Now, the large advanced motor, this thing is a advanced motor. This thing contains a lot of stuff in here. This processing unit is absolutely insane. And I kind of feel kind of rewarded getting this close to the end. Now we are working towards making that RAM, right? And the real reason that we needed to get all of this stuff up and running that we set up is so that way we can make that styrene-butadiene rubber. This stuff is really, really good outside of just making this because we're able to actually make a ton of rubber sheets with very little of this stuff that we can use excess after we hit a certain amount of RAM that we produce. But we still have a few other steps that we're going to work on next episode, and that is the production of argon. We're also going to need to make this butane rubber and also get ourselves some silicon wafers, which all require iridium, things that we're already producing, just more argon and things like that. And argon's actually a pretty straightforward thing for us to make as well. So this is going to be just something that we have to spend time working on, right? This is going to require a little bit of a setup as well to be able to produce enough liquid air and enough argon for our future endeavors. So there's still a lot to do, and we're going to be working on all of that next episode. So if you enjoyed today's episode and you learned something new, be sure to click that subscribe button, as this whole series has taken a lot of work and effort, and a lot of it has just gone into this alone. So I would really appreciate it if you just check that out. Also, check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/ChosenArchitect. I do live stream about 3 days a week, so you can always find me over there, and you can definitely find me hanging out in the Discord, so join that Discord down in the description below. And guys, I thank you so much. Comment down below, by the way, what has been the most interesting part of this mod thus far? I would love to hear from you. And with that being said, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Crispy Egg. Thank you so much, by the way, for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting in one of the best ways possible. Thank you all so very much. I look forward to, of course, seeing you in the next episode. And as always, thanks for watching.